I'm an American who's been living in London, and these are the top 10 things that I love about living in this city. Before I start, I wanted to give some background into how I got to London, and that story really begins when I was a child. I remember watching The Parent Trap, and there was that London montage scene, and I think that really set me into dreaming about this city that I had never been to even. And cue little Leora speaking in a British accent all the time. And anyone who has known me my entire life would know that that's been like a huge dream of mine. I had gotten a chance to visit the city actually twice in my life. Once when I was 13 and once when I was 21. And both times I had the time of my life, and it just kind of reaffirmed how much I loved this city. But as I got a bit older, I started to kind of push that dream down and think to myself, maybe it's better to just visit and not live in this city, because I don't want to ruin that city. You know, visiting is different than actually living in a city, so I didn't really want to ruin or taint this ideal London that I had built up in my head. Fast forward to when I was looking for a master's program, and I decided to look into universities in London because my logic was, okay, it's only a year, maybe I can see in that year if I actually do enjoy living in London. And if I don't, no worries, that's only a year of my life. But if I do love it, then I've gathered some good information. And so I happened to move to London during the pandemic, which was probably not the best year to give this test a try. But even throughout that year, I fell in love with the city. And that really proved to me that this was the place I wanted to live. Now, 4 years later, I don't regret that decision. I plan to stay here for as long as I can. And these are my 10 favorite things about the city. So number 1 is the public transportation. And this was something that I fell in love with even when I was a kid visiting here. The public transportation in London is very extensive and easy to navigate, that you can always get around without a car. No matter where you need to go, there is a way to get there on public transportation. But the other element of it, which is what I loved when I was a tourist, was how easy it was to navigate without asking for help, especially the London Underground, which is also called the Tube. There are also ways to always get home no matter the hour, and so as an American who is very used to driving around everywhere, to come to a city that has such an expansive public transportation system is quite life-changing. And then the other thing about it is that it's quite frequent. So it spreads far, you can navigate it easily, and you're not waiting long. I never wait longer than 15 minutes for a bus, but that's like the longest that I would wait for a bus. Buses are usually going to be coming every 5 minutes for a specific route, and then the underground is going to come every few minutes. So what that does for me is it just allows me to travel quite easily, and not have to factor that into my travel plans. The second thing I love about this city might come as a shock, but it is the food. Now, I know that the British are not well known for their cuisine, and I will give that stereotype its credence. When I say that the food in London is great, I'm not talking about British food. I am talking about the fact that you can get food from pretty much everywhere around the world, and you can find authentic food from anywhere around the world, and it's very, very tasty. It's always just a matter of like, okay, if I'm going out to a restaurant, where do I want to travel in the world today with my belly? And then I can go. Isn't that great? The third thing that I love is tied to the fact that there's food from all over the world. The reason for that is that there are people here from all over the world. So what that ends up doing is you make friends with people from all over who have their own unique stories. And beyond that form of diversity, there's also just a diversity in how people express themselves in the city. It's not the type of city where people are going to be coming up to you and being friendly and just asking you questions. But within that there is a freedom, because nobody's gonna ask you questions if you're wearing a certain type of outfit. You see people doing whatever they want in the city and nobody bats an eye. And so within that there's a freedom of expression that I've never gotten to experience, and I've really come into my own here in the city because nobody cares what you're doing. There's just like this allowance to be who you want to be. So number 4 on my list is that it's a place that people are always passing through. I'm someone who's lived all over the world and I have friends in every corner of the world, and so that used to be very difficult because it just meant that I didn't get a chance to see a lot of the people that I love. But I find that because London is this hub that people will tend to pass through for business meetings, or they've got a connecting flight or whatever it might be, I end up actually seeing a lot of people that I love on a more regular basis than if I was just living in America still. And that brings me to number 5, which is that it's a really easy place to travel from. Now, I know that this is a list about things I love about London, so why am I talking about leaving London? Well, because you do need to actually travel still. As much as I love London, I do love travel as well. So first of all, I find that it's a place that I can get cheap flights to and from to many parts of the world, specifically Europe. And then even within that, there are so many airports in London with public transportation that connects you to those airports. So the whole travel process from start to finish is quite easy, and it just allows me to continue to travel quite regularly. So number 6 is the amount of free activities there are, and in particular how many museums and galleries are free. I can just pop into a museum, look at one exhibit, and then just leave. Maybe it's even just one painting that I want to see in a museum, and then I can just leave. I love going to museums in general, but I find that if I've paid, let's say, $20 for a ticket to go see an art museum in New York, I am going to make sure I get my money's worth, and I will be blocking out 3 hours of time to go through every single room. In London, because most of the museums are free, what that means is if I'm out and about and maybe I'm meeting a friend for dinner and I've got an hour to kill, I can just go into a museum, look at a few paintings, look at a exhibit, and then leave. And I don't need to worry about getting my money's worth because I know that I can go back whenever I want. It also then means that it's a great way to just do something with a friend that doesn't cost a lot of money but still is a way to get some culture. It acts as a great background as well for socializing. Number 8 would be the parks in London. The parks in London are unmatched. They are just beautiful. When I came here during COVID, due to all of the restrictions, that was oftentimes the place that me and my friends were allowed to meet up. And I hold such fond memories from that time, but they continue to just nourish me. I can go there and walk for hours by myself, or I can meet up with a friend and just go on nice walks or sit in the park and have a picnic. Especially during the summer, they're beautiful, but I personally even like walking around the parks when it's raining. I find that to be just like very cinematic. And one of my favorite facts actually is that a lot of the Parisian parks are influenced by Napoleon III's exile to London, where he spent a lot of time in Hyde Park and ended up bringing that back to Paris. And so something that we associate with Paris is actually something that comes from London. I find myself in different periods of my time here coming up with which park is my favorite. For a certain time it was Hyde Park, because you can just do everything there. You can go see Kensington Palace, which is where Prince William resides, and they always have exhibitions there. There's a large body of water that you can walk around or you can paddle boat in. They've got beautiful flowers that are planted throughout the park. And on top of that, you can also see the Serpentine galleries for free, which there are 2 galleries in the park that are just wonderful. After that became my favorite park, then I actually started to fall in love with Hampstead Heath, which is one of the biggest parks, and it is such a nice escape from the city, and yet it's within the city. And there's this one part in Hampstead Heath where you stand in a particular place and you get a gorgeous view of the entire skyline of London. But then if you literally rotate your head, all of a sudden you see this very like quaint village. And then if you rotate again, you just see large expanse of land. So it's just got everything within it. And those are just 2 of the many parks that exist in London. There's also little parks that are on different squares, so you can just go and like sit and read a book on a bench and just like take in all of the beauty. But yeah, I mean, the parks are kind of an endless place for you to explore and offer such a great form of nature within the city. So my 9th favorite thing about London are all of the different types of neighborhoods. You get a real microculture within each of the neighborhoods in London, or the boroughs of London. And what that does is, if you want to live in a certain type of environment, you can find the neighborhood that's perfect for you, or even on a day out, if you're looking for a certain vibe, then you can like find that vibe wherever you want, and London has it all. And within that, there is something really wonderful about the way that the city is laid out. There is just a few parts where there are clustered skyscrapers, but for the most part, all of the buildings are just a few stories high. And so even though London is a giant city, and I just sometimes forget how big it is because everything is so low down, like the scale of the city feels smaller than what it actually is. And to me, I find that quite comforting because I don't ever feel overwhelmed by like just craning my neck as I look at all of the buildings. And then number 10 is the West End. I am a theater girl, and I love how I can always just see a show, and for the most part, I would say the ticket prices are quite affordable. I like to go maybe once a month or once every other month to see a show. When I say the West End, I also just mean theater in general. And you can often just find the tickets, you know, the day of if you want to be spontaneous, or you can plan something in advance. But I oftentimes think about how that is something that I take for granted, which is that I can just go and see a play or a musical or any type of piece of theater whenever I want to. And it's one of my favorite things about living in the city. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this little list. I hope that it has given you some insight into what it's like to live in the city even after 4 years. I would say that, you know, the honeymoon glasses are off. I've lived in the city, I've cried in this city, I've worked in this city, I've had to do all of the regular day-to-day things with life, and that still has not changed the way that I feel about London. I still very much am in love with this city. And I just want to end with, if you do have a dream of living in this city, I would say give it a shot. Don't lose hope that you can make that dream a reality. If you have any questions, I love talking about London, clearly, so I'm always happy to answer questions and maybe make a video about that if I think that that's a topic that warrants a larger discussion.